Gaurapimanande. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Pri Vrajgacharya Stotara Satya Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Chirabai Charanarvind Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki ISKCON DBT Founder Acharya's Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Sigaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gradhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Sri Vrindavan Mathura Dham Ki Sri Dwarka Dham Ki Sri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Sri Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Sri Mayapur Chandradai Mandir Ki Gangamayi Jamunamayi Ki Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai Shri Gunithai Ki Jai Shri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi Ki Jai Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Jai Shri Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Sri Radhamadhava Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Pimirande. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and to Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Sarakaya Chakshurinmiritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Jita Padakamanam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Ditam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakamitam Sya Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kancana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Madhiraya Nasta Prayesha Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatu Tamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhita Uttama Shloka Charita Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhangyam Swasyayanam Maha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Shri Surabhyai Namaha Om Shri Surabhyai Namaha Om Shri Surabhyai Namaha Mukham karoti vasaram pangum nangayate girim Yat kripatamaham bande Sri Gurum Ganataranam Yat kripatamaham bande Sri Gurum Ganataranam. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatm, Canto number 1, chapter number 4, the appearance of Narada Muni, and today, what is that text number?
It's 25.
25. Yes. Strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ trayī śruti-gocarā karma-śreyasi mūḍhānāṁ śreya evam bhaved iha iti bhāratam ākhyānaṁ kṛpayā muninā kṛtam strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ trayī śruti-gocarā karma-śreyasi mūḍhānāṁ śreya evam bhavet iha iti bhāratam ākhyānaṁ kṛpayā muninā kṛtam strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ trayī śruti-gocarā karma-śreyasi mūḍhānāṁ śreya evam bhavet iha iti bhāratam ākhyānaṁ kṛpayā muninā kṛtam strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ trayī śruti-gocarā karma-śreyasi mūḍhānāṁ śreya evam bhavet iha iti bhāratam ākhyānaṁ kṛpayā muninā kṛtam.
strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ
strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ
trayī śruti-gocarā karma-śreyasi mūḍhānāṁ śreya evam bhavet iti bhāratam ākhyānaṁ kṛpayā muninā kṛtam
strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ trayī śruti-gocarā
karma-śreyasi mūḍhānāṁ śreya evam bhavet iti bhāratam ākhyānaṁ kṛpayā muninā kṛtam
strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ trayī śruti-gocarā karma-śreyasi mūḍhānāṁ śreya evam bhavet iti bhāratam ākhyānaṁ kṛpayā muninā kṛtam. Strī, the women class. Śūdra, the laboring class. Dvija-bandhūnāṁ, of the friends of the twice born. Trayī, the three sacrificial Vedas. Śruti-gocarā, not allowed to be heard. Karma-śreyasi, in the successful execution of ritual duties. Mūḍhānāṁ, of the less intelligent. Śreyaḥ, supreme benefit. Evam, thus. Bhavet, achieved. Iha, by this. Iti, thus thinking. Bhāratam, the great Mahābhārata. Ākhyānaṁ, historical facts. Kṛpayā, out of great mercy. Muninā, by the muni. Kṛtam is completed. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Out of compassion, the great sage thought it wise that this would enable men to achieve the ultimate goal of life. Thus he compiled the great historical narration called the Mahābhārata for women, laborers, and friends of the twice born. Kindly repeat after me. Out of compassion.
Out of compassion.
The great sage,
thought it wise
that this would enable men to achieve the ultimate goal of life. Thus he compiled the great historical narration called the Mahābhārata for women, laborers, and friends of the twice born. Purport. The friends of the twice born families are those who are born in the families of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, or the spiritually cultured families, but who themselves are not equal to their forefathers. Such descendants are not recognized as such for want of purificatory achievements. The purificatory activities begin even before the birth of a child, and the seed-giving reformatory process is called garbhadhana samskara. One who has not undergone such garbhadhana samskara or spiritual family planning is not accepted as being of an actual twice-born family. The garbhadhana samskara is followed by other purificatory processes, out of which the sacred thread ceremony is one. This is performed at the time of spiritual initiation. After this particular samskara, one is rightly called twice born. One birth is calculated during the seed-giving samskara, and the second birth is calculated at the time of spiritual initiation. One who has been able to undergo such important samskaras can be called a bona fide twice born. If the father and the mother do not undertake the process of spiritual family planning and simply beget children out of passion only, their children are called dvija-bandhūs. These dvija-bandhūs are certainly not as intelligent as the children of the regular twice-born families. The dvija-bandhūs are classified with the Shudras and the women class, who are by nature less intelligent. The Shudras and the women class do not have to undergo any samskara save and except the ceremony of marriage. The less intelligent class of men, namely women, Shudras, and unqualified sons of the higher castes, are devoid of necessary qualifications to understand the purpose of the transcendental Vedas. For them, the Mahābhārata was prepared. The purpose of the Mahābhārata is to administer the purpose of the Vedas. And therefore, within the Mahābhārata is placed the Bhagavad Gita, the summary Veda. The less intelligent are more interested in stories than in philosophy. And therefore, excuse me. And therefore, the philosophy of the Vedas is included within the Mahābhārata in the form of the Bhagavad Gita, spoken by Lord Sri Krishna. Vyasadeva and Lord Krishna are both on the transcendental plane, and therefore they collaborated in doing good to the fallen souls of this age. The Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic knowledge. It is the first book of spiritual values, as the Upanishads are. The Vedanta philosophy is the subject matter for study by the spiritual graduates. Only the postgraduate spiritual student can enter into the spiritual or devotional service of the Lord. It is a great science, and the great professor is the Lord Himself in the form of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And persons who are empowered by Him can initiate others in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Translation again. Out of compassion, the great sage thought it wise that this would enable men to achieve the ultimate goal of life. And thus he compiled a great historical narration called the Mahābhārata for women, laborers, and friends of the twice born. So we need to keep in mind how, looking at the previous verses that we read, the original Veda was one book, Yajurveda. And Srila Vyasadeva, knowing that people in Kali Yuga, means us, not so wise, not so intelligent, not having very strong intellectual ability, very weak to deeply understand intellectually. So I see the previous verses mentioning how Srila Vyasadeva edited the Vedas so they might be assimilated by less intellectual men. Less intellectual men. This is our position in Kali Yuga. So from the one Veda became four Vedas. And from the four Vedas came Itihas and Purana. So here there is mention about Mahābhārata, that Srila Vyasadeva especially compiled the Mahābhārata for the strī-śūdra-dvijabandhūnāṁ, for the women class, the labor class, and the friends of the twice born. Hare Krishna. In other words, everyone this was the mood actually of Srila Vyasadeva. He desired that everyone be given an opportunity to receive the Vedic knowledge. But generally, this is explained also in the purport, generally to start receiving Vedic knowledge, the tradition is that one needs to be born in a Brahmana family, or a family twice born, dvija. Means one has to have undergone certain rituals. One's parents should have performed the garbhadhana samskara and other samskaras. And then up to the samskara of diksha, of receiving initiation. It is only after receiving initiation does the spiritual master begin to instruct the disciple. So in other words, there are certain qualifications necessary to understand some of the, we can say, higher principles that are described in the Vedic literatures. But as Prabhupada explains here, in the mood of compassion, Srila Vyasadeva, he not only thought of dividing the Vedas into four, but also expanding upon that in the form of the Mahābhārata, which is full of different narrations and stories. Generally, people like to hear stories. In Kali Yuga, we can't take too much, we can't hear too much philosophy. We get lost, we get sidetracked, because we don't have that capacity, that ability. Much less in Kali Yuga than previously. Or unless one undergoes some particular training, then he may, that's the whole purpose of brahmachari life. Brahmachari life is to actually prepare one and qualify a person to actually be sufficiently alert and attentive and purified also to to receive transcendental knowledge. So because there are different levels, not everyone is equal. Spiritually, we're all equal. But we have some differences due to the modes of material nature, isn't it? Due to the modes of material nature, when one is more under the influence of mode of ignorance, more difficult for one to understand or to receive knowledge. But still, out of compassion, Srila Vyasadeva wanted to make this knowledge available to everyone. And even though this is Kali Yuga, this transcendental knowledge, which actually begins from the instructions given by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, again, this is explained in the purport, Mahābhārata has been especially written for the majority of people who don't have that kind of attention span, who cannot sit down and hear long classes on philosophy. It's like people have different natures. if you give a book to someone, he'll, because he's accustomed and he's inclined and it's his nature, he'll take interest and read, even it is let's say a highly philosophical book. That's when you can start understanding the natures of people. You give a book of philosophy to 10 people, and then you come back after an hour, and you can understand who actually has read or taken interest or understood what's in those 10 books of philosophy. So we have different natures, but because everyone should be given the opportunity to receive transcendental knowledge. So in Kali Yuga, at different places also, Srila Prabhupada explains, Mahābhārata is more important, more easily accessible. And that's why, up until quite recently, the tradition here in India, for example, as you probably know, was to, in the villages, I think it's in some places still going on, people hear stories from Ramayana, Mahābhārata, and they have, I know in Indonesia, for example, actually all of these we call Far East countries, Asian countries on the Far East, Thailand, Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and so many other neighboring countries. To this day they have what is called the shadow puppet. Different kinds of puppet shows. Usually they start in the evening and they go till the next morning, till sunrise the next morning. And people stay up and they're glued. What are they watching? It's one person. It's very interesting. I attended once actually. Takes many years of training actually. So one person, these are all based on stories of Mahābhārata. Even in Indonesia, which is, a Muslim country. Indonesia is number one largest Muslim country in the world, but they have these stories through puppet shows based on Ramayana and Mahābhārata. The culture is, Vedic culture. So one person will be, that's what they call shadow. He will be behind a screen, and he will have many different, puppets and whatnot, and some light will be there. So everyone is sitting on the other side. They don't see him. They can hear. They can hear him. And he will have already mastered like 50 different intonation voices to represent the different characters. So he will bring up, one character and make him move like this and speak. And this keeps the attention of like hundreds of people whole night. Nighttime, usually people sleep, right? Whole night they will, because the stories are very captivating. And they're full of meaning. They're full of, what is it? Morality, isn't it? Moral stories. The moral of the story. So storytelling was a very developed art previously. It's a big science actually. And unfortunately with the advent of television, storytelling has gone out the window. Everyone now is just like laid back and becoming like zombies practically. So many, we know from Mahābhārata how the story of the Pandavas, or Ramayana also, Lord Ramachandra being exiled for 14 years. So many anecdotes, so many things happen, and we see especially the nature and the character of these great, how they face, how they deal with adversities, with problems, and how, because they are so fixed on the principles of dharma, that they can overcome all kinds of calamities. So this is the special mercy of Srila Vyasadeva in presenting us especially the Srimad Bhagavatam as well as the Mahābhārata, and that is why within our disciplic succession we especially, our acharyas have emphasized especially the importance of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. We mainly focus and concentrate on these two, and of course because Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahābhārata, part of Mahābhārata, so we also at different times like to hear, different narrations that are, presented in the Mahābhārata. So it means that actually there is something for everyone, and this is what we call the culture, culture, Vedic culture, or culture of Krishna consciousness. And culture means a way of thinking, a way of life, a way of living. And we have, in so many different ways, because of modernization, we've gone away from that culture, you see. And it's extremely difficult to bring back that culture in the present context for so many different reasons. Still, to whatever extent that we can, we, as we are doing, for example, at least hearing from the Bhagavatam about the activities of great personalities like Srila Vyasadeva, we get a little glimpse, a little understanding of how it has come about that this original Vedic knowledge is available, isn't it? Available to us even today in this Kali Yuga, because of the knowledge having been transmitted by our various acharyas like that. So these are a few things mentioned in the purport. The importance of samskaras, of course, is mentioned, and the special significance of the Mahābhārata. Prabhupada does mention that the Bhagavad Gita, we've all heard this before, is like the ABCs, the beginning, isn't it? The basic foundation for spiritual knowledge. Whereas the Vedanta philosophy is the subject matter for study by the spiritual graduates. Just like we have Bhakti Shastri, Prabhupada, he introduced way back when he was with us in the early days, the different study courses, Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, Bhakti Vedanta, Bhakti Sarvabhauma. Not everyone, different devotees are taking these courses, but they're not so easy. You have to write an essay, many essays actually, and not everyone likes to write essays. Not everyone has that natural inclination or ability like that. But fortunately, we can all chant Hare Krishna, and that's the most important mantra, isn't it? Being the Maha Mantra. And anyone who chants the holy name, then whatever is revealed in the Vedic literatures can actually become revealed within the heart of anyone who sincerely, under proper guidance, chants the most important mantra, the mantra, the chant for deliverance, as you say. Any comments or questions on this?
Here, no, bhakti here mentioned, Vedanta philosophy is the subject matter for study by the spiritual graduates. Only the postgraduate spiritual student can enter into the spiritual or devotional service of the Lord. What is the difference in spiritual and devotional service? Spiritual means only studying Vedas, or devotional service means chanting, hearing.
No, there's
market, bring flowers.
When Prabhupada mentions only the postgraduate spiritual student can enter into the spiritual or devotional service. Spiritual and devotional service means the same. Devotional service is a spiritual activity. The perfection of spirituality is devotional service, isn't it? Yeah. So anyone who is fortunate to be introduced to the process of bhakti can take up that activity. The point that Prabhupada is mentioning here is that actually it is a very great science, and then the Prabhupada mentions that after that sentence that you just read. So, postgraduate means anyone who takes up the chanting of the holy name, takes up to the practice of devotional service, he's on the level of postgraduate. The beginning level is there in the Bhagavad Gita, and then higher level is in the Srimad Bhagavatm, and both are leading towards the same goal or the same end. That means practicing devotional service, which there's no difference as such. Sometimes people do make a difference between spirituality. There's so many forms, different ways, different kinds of spirituality that people practice. And sometimes in the name of spirituality, they will say spirituality, but actually it's not, from our understanding or from understanding of Shastra, it may not be spiritual. Spiritual for the devotees especially means having that element of bhakti, or that element of devotion, therefore devotional service. Devotional service is considered isn't it, the topmost level of spirituality. Or as Lord Krishna explains in the Gita, he said,
illiterate man can do this bhakti service, devotional service in illiterate field. He can listen and chant Hare Krishna.
Who?
Illiterate.
Illiterate. Yes, it's not a question.
Not go through this Vedanta and Vedas and
It is not a question of literacy. Literacy is different from culture, isn't it? Someone may be illiterate, but very culturally advanced. And someone may be literate, but very, not at all cultured. So it has nothing to do with being able to read or being able to write. Previously, most people actually would not know, how to read and write, because that's something you learn in the Gurukul, for example. And most people did not go to did not attend Gurukul, but they were cultured, they were advanced, because they were hearing. Most important activity is actually to hear. And by hearing, one can become elevated, one can become cultured. Anything?
Facebook question from Champakalata Mataji. Hare Krishna. Gurudev, please ask. Hare Krishna Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisances at your lotus feet. In the fast was spiritual initiation by Guru and studying the Shastras meant for women also or only men?
The question is whether initiation?
In the fast spiritual initiation by Guru and studying the Shastras meant for women also or only for men?
So the question is whether spiritual initiation
Studying the Shastras
and
studying the
studying the Shastra
Shastras only for men or women also?
only for men or also for women? Well, if we look at the standard and example that we have within our ISKCON society, Srila Prabhupada initiated women. Actually, this was started even before Srila Prabhupada. This, in many ways, is quite recent, because when the Vedic culture or Vedic system was more in place, was established, then women at that time did not receive initiation the way that we see it today. Their initiation was at the time of marriage, because their spiritual master, this is the injunction that is there, this is the system, is actually their husband. Swami, Strī. Strī means women and Swami means master. So in India, in Indonesia, and other countries possibly, husband and wife are referred to as Swami Strī, as master, and as Strī means one who is serving, actually. Ultimately, both are serving. So traditionally, the women, when they got married, that was that particular, we could say, samskara, ceremony. They became initiated by the marriage ceremony, and their husband being their spiritual master, they received knowledge just like one does from the spiritual master or his representative on Shastra. Now, because we don't have that Vedic culture set up in modern day society, so Srila Prabhupada has arranged and allowed for women to be initiated and to also study Shastra. So we have to see things in proper context. Bottom line is that no one is actually barred from receiving transcendental knowledge, isn't it? Anyone who takes birth in this material world, especially in the human form of life, I mean that is when we get an opportunity to begin hearing about transcendental subject matters. But traditionally, when there is a proper arrangement in society in terms of Vedic culture, there was that system was there where as described actually by Narada Muni in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, Narada Muni gives various details regarding what is meant to be the relationship between husband and wife, isn't it? And now we have gone so far, we've strayed from that so much that very difficult for people in general, even for our own devotees at times, to really understand what is meant to be the actual, let's say, standard. So in our present, until we reestablish or have again the Vedic culture properly functioning, we have at present this arrangement where women are getting initiation. They get both Harinam and also second initiation, but they don't get Brahmana thread, isn't it? So that's the present situation. Anything else?
There is a comment from Kamalini Mataji. The art of puppet shows as almost there in India because of lack of support.
The
art of puppet shows.
The art of
puppet show. Puppet show. The art of puppet show, yeah. As almost dead in India because of lack of support. It was a wonderful medium to spread God consciousness and spiritual knowledge.
Yes. Yes, because people's consciousness have changed, because there is lack of support from leaders in so many different ways, because there is less and less God consciousness. Therefore, television again, very major factor. So therefore, that is presently practically non-existing at present. But it was a great science, and one day actually it will have to be reintroduced again. Okay, thank you very much. Jai Kanantara Srimad Bhagavatm ki Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Gaur Purnandi.
His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj ki Jai.